With the holidays complete, it's time to do a new video exploring the wording of Resolve. The United States ought not provide military aid to authoritarian regimes. Here we'll take an in-depth look at the important words and phrases that framework can be built around. Certainly we haven't thought of all the ideas, but these 5 phrases should give you a jump start. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos. Throughout the year, we look at each LD topic and examine framework and warrants for the AF and NEG. With that, let's talk a little about the importance of framework. Framework is the topicality of Lincoln Douglas. In policy, topicality is made up of 4 distinct arguments: interpretation, violations, standard, and voter issues. Each answers an important what or why question for the judge. Unlike policy's topicality, framework deals with only 2 of these arguments, interpretation and standard. Of course, voters are discussed late in the round, but by then it's more of an overall framework, not specific definition. So these 2 arguments are what we'll concentrate on today. Let's get started. Defining the United States is usually one of the nitpicky framework arguments that let your opponent know they're in for a long round. However, how you define the actor of the resolution can play a large role in your argument. Really, there are 3 ways to define United States within the resolution. They are through definitions of federal, business, and people. Federal is the most straightforward reading of the resolution. It's the United States. Black's Law Dictionary provides a unifying definition for the U.S. as being made up of the 50 federated states, American Samoa, District of Columbia, Johnston Island, Guam, Wake and Midway Islands, Northern Marianas, and U.S. Virgin Islands. This definition emphasizes the wholeness of the United States, reinforcing a jointness of obligation. That is most likely the federal government, but could also be used to support a definition about American cultural values and how authoritarian regimes are antithetical to these democratic values. Next, the business definition is a little looser within the resolution. The BBC defines the United States as the world's foremost economic and military power with global interests of an unmatched global reach. This definition speaks to the U.S. as an economic force, not necessarily as a mode of government. From this interpretation, we can show the obligation of the resolution, not providing military aid, as a business decision. Really, this could play to either side. The AF could show advantage through the redirection of resources to productive private consumption, or the NEG could show disadvantage with the collapse of the defense economy. Of course, this would play best with a unique interpretation for authoritarian regimes that we'll talk about later. The last interpretation of the United States that we'll talk about is the most interesting. It's one that sees the U.S. not as a government, but as a nation of individual people empowered by freedom. Justice Gorsuch, in his confirmation hearing in 2017, said, "The people in this country are sovereign," as Lincoln said. It's a government by the people, for the people, so the people are sovereign. That's a great perspective, but what does it mean for the resolution? One interesting concept that this interpretation deals with remittance, which is the transfer of money from foreign workers back to their home countries. According to the World Bank, remittance far outpaces official development aid and even direct investment by the international community. Third world countries would not be able to sustain without remittance payments propping up their economy. This interpretation is the weakest in standard, however, would fit the NEG best with the ground standard, arguing that the interpretation leaves room for the negative to argue an unpopular position. The next phrase to look at is ought not. We won't spend nearly as much time going over the workhorse of framework, but ought not is far more than just a converse of the moral ought interpretation. Patricia Greenspan provides an interpretation that suggests the negative of ought does not necessarily speak to the inherent non-value of an action, but only the value of its alternatives. Therefore, it is not a normative argument, but a cost analysis that involves morals. A lexicon's best standard makes the most sense as this definition best fits common vernacular, especially with lay judges. At least once you explain what lexicon's best means. Working our way down the resolution, provide really does not offer a lot to the framework, but one interpretation the negative may be interested in pursuing is from the Cambridge English Dictionary. It defines it as to say that something must happen if particular conditions exist. This interpretation sets the NEG up to argue that military aid is an important negotiating tool for the U.S. to interact with friendly though authoritarian regimes. By cutting this tool out, we limit our ability to influence countries like Saudi Arabia, further hindering the larger goal of spreading democracy. With a consequentialist criterion, this could be pushed effectively, possibly encompassing the affirmative value and criterion. Military aid, or security assistance as it is referred to officially, deals with more than merely providing weapons and training to foreign militaries. Tina Katanow, the acting assistant secretary for the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, provides a great definition showing the many facets of military aid. Her testimony before the Senate outlined the far reaches of military aid, including terrorism, organized crime, sea travel, and our own national security. Of course, you could always go the opposite direction. Military aid, while part of security assistance, has a much tighter definition. In a Washington Post review of foreign assistance from 2016, they took this tight approach to military aid, stating, "Security assistance is a broader term than so-called military aid because this financial support is often extended to other types of security forces such as anti-narcotic or trafficking units. Actually, only about half the security assistance budget is provided by the DoD." With this definition, a strict view of military aid will center mainly on the war on terrorism and military financing deals like with Israel. Defining in the negative is usually not a great position, however, this definition provides a clear bright line standard for the judge. It clearly shows what is and is not military aid. This might work best as a counterinterpretation for those squirrels you might run into. The last phrase has the potential to be the most important interpretation of the round. How the object of the resolution is defined will have reaching effects on clash. We see two main interpretations, with each being viable for either side of the debate. The first deals with the lack of a rule of law. Encyclopedia Britannica defines these regimes as, in government, authoritarianism denotes any political system that concentrates power in the hands of a leader or a small elite that is not constitutionally responsible to the body of the people. The strength of this definition is in its standard of education. It allows the debate to concentrate on arguably the core of the resolution mandate, the philosophical comparisons of free versus authoritarian political systems. It also establishes a limit to the round, ensuring each side stays on topic. On the other side, a broader definition would look more at the motives of the regime rather than the mechanisms. Jeff Coleman of Boston University's School of Law notes the authoritarianism is more about controlling ideas than dictating to an unwilling public. In this interpretation, authoritarianism is an attempt to control the concept of truth by turning the public against segments of the media. Coleman sees the current Trump administration as authoritarian. While this is a great definition for debate, be warned that Coleman's analysis lacks any historical depth. Nearly every president from Adams to Obama has used portions of the media and public to control the national narrative. This just might be the first time in his adult life it has been used against his perspective. However, this interpretation can provide a unique view of the resolution's object. So, there's 5 phrases we feel are important to the January and February Lincoln-Douglas topic. Resolve: the United States ought not provide military aid to authoritarian regimes. We definitely haven't thought of all the ways to develop your framework, but this should serve as a jump start to your case brewing. Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more of what we have to offer at Real Critique, check out our website. There you'll find everything from LD theory to criterion analysis. Also, follow us on social media. Finally, subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the like button.